They don't ignore you because you lack value. They ignore you because you gave away your value too cheaply. Every reply sent in seconds. Every call answered on the first ring. Every invitation accepted without hesitation. Every ounce of energy poured into people who never paused to earn it. You believed that availability made you lovable, that consistency made you unforgettable. But reality is far colder. Abundance makes you invisible. What is always present fades into the background, while what is rare is carved into memory. Machiavelli warned us centuries ago, men in general judge more from appearances than from reality. All men have eyes, but few have the gift of penetration. When you are always available, when you are always present, the appearance you create is not one of strength, loyalty, or love. It is one of predictability. And predictability kills desire. Think about it. No one obsesses over the air they breathe, though it is vital. No one trembles over water when the faucet never runs dry. But remove those things for just a moment, and panic sets in. Breath becomes sacred. Water becomes priceless. Scarcity doesn't change the object. It changes the perception of the object. And perception is what human obsession feeds on. You've been taught, by parents, by movies, by songs, that love is proven through proximity, through endless loyalty, through showing up no matter what. But obsession does not grow from what is constant. It grows from what is uncertain. It grows from fear. The fear of loss, the fear of absence, the fear that what you once assumed would always be there might vanish without warning. Machiavelli knew this truth when he wrote, "It is much safer to be feared than loved, if one of the two must be lacking." And in the realm of relationships, whether romantic, social, or political, the fear of losing access to you is the fire that fuels desire. Let me make it brutally simple. The more available you are, the less valuable you become. The more scarce you are, the more powerful you become. You don't need to scream, you don't need to beg, you don't need to demand. You only need to disappear, strategically and silently. And when you do, watch how quickly the same people who once treated you like furniture begin searching for you like lost treasure. Diamonds are just carbon, rocks buried in the earth. They do not glow, they do not sing, they do not move. And yet, entire empires have killed, schemed, and bled for them. But not because they are the strongest, not because they are the most useful, but because they are scarce. Now imagine someone handed you a bucket of diamonds every morning, free of cost, free of effort. Would you still guard them with your life? Or would they begin to look like gravel? That's you. You are the diamond, but you've been giving yourself away as if you were dust on the roadside. Scarcity is not cruelty. It is not manipulation. It is not a childish game of ignore them so they miss you. Scarcity is the reclamation of gravity. It is the refusal to hand away your value without price. It is the recognition that humans do not chase what they own. They chase what they fear losing. So here is the cost if you ignore this law. You will be loved weakly, lazily, half-heartedly. You will be respected only when convenient. You will exhaust yourself pouring energy into relationships that treat your presence like background noise. And worse, when you finally collapse from the weight of it, the world will not even notice. But if you embrace scarcity, everything changes. You shift the balance of power. You reset the terms of desire. You introduce mystery, tension, uncertainty. And it is uncertainty, not safety, that keeps the human mind awake at night. Because let me tell you, if you are always there, you will be forgotten. But if you dare to disappear, you will be hunted. Human beings do not desire what they understand. They do not long for what they can predict. They do not cherish what they can access without effort. They chase what is uncertain. They crave what is slipping away. They obsess over what refuses to bend. Think of the last time you couldn't reach someone you wanted. Maybe it was a delayed text, a phone call that never came, a silence that stretched into hours. What did your mind do in that space? It filled the gap with questions. Where are they? Why aren't they responding? Did I say something wrong? Did something happen? Are they with someone else? That gap, the absence of answers, is where desire begins. Now flip it. Think of the people who are always there, always reachable, always orbiting your attention. Do you ever stop to think about them? Do you ever wonder what they're doing, who they're with, what they're thinking? Or do you take their presence for granted, assuming they'll always be there when you need them? That is the difference scarcity creates. Machiavelli observed that men are driven by two principal impulses, either by love or by fear. But here's the truth: love without fear grows complacent. Love without the threat of loss becomes lazy. The moment someone believes you will always remain, no matter what they do, they stop cherishing your presence. They stop investing. They stop chasing. Because the mind does not value what it cannot lose. Scarcity flips this. Scarcity reintroduces fear, not fear of punishment, not fear of anger, but fear of absence. When you withdraw your presence, you become an unanswered question. And unanswered questions grow louder in the mind than any words you could ever speak. Look around the world. Scarcity drives markets, religions, politics, and relationships alike. The rarest metals are guarded in vaults. The rarest books are locked behind glass. The rarest experiences are worth fortunes. People travel across the world not to see what is common, but to witness what is rare. Human beings are hardwired to worship scarcity. And yet, in your own life, you've done the opposite. You've flooded the market with yourself. You've given unlimited access to your time, your emotions, your forgiveness. You've convinced yourself that being constantly available would make people value you more. But in truth, it made you forgettable. Because what is infinite is ignored. What is finite is fought for. Think of the mythologies humans build around scarce things. A shooting star lasts seconds, and yet cultures across the world have written wishes upon them. A total eclipse lasts minutes, and yet entire nations gather in awe to watch the sky go dark. The power lies not in the object itself, but in its rarity. That is why scarcity creates desire. It is not because people are cruel. It is not because people do not see your worth. It is because their brains are wired to assign value not to what is abundant, but to what is rare. And if you refuse to understand this truth, you will keep giving yourself away like air, vital, but unnoticed. So ask yourself, do you want to be air, always present, never questioned, never treasured? Or do you want to be a diamond, difficult to find, impossible to ignore, unforgettable once lost? Scarcity by itself is not enough. If something is scarce but worthless, no one cares. A grain of sand in the desert is infinite, but one grain of sand in your hand means nothing. A drop of water in the ocean is invisible. Scarcity only creates obsession when it is paired with value. And this brings us to the formula. High value plus limited access equals obsession. You could be the most intelligent, compassionate, interesting person alive. But if you are endlessly available, if your presence is unlimited, then your value dissolves. It becomes like an open tap, useful but ignored until needed. Obsession doesn't come from open taps. Obsession comes from fountains hidden deep in the forest, fountains people fight to reach. This is where most people fail. They believe their value is enough. They believe that being smart, loyal, kind, and supportive will keep others invested. But the truth is harsher. Value without scarcity breeds complacency. People grow used to what is always present, no matter how good it is. Even beauty, even brilliance, even kindness becomes invisible when it is overexposed. Let me give you a story. There was a man named Leo. Everyone who knew him called him loyal, dependable, the good guy. He remembered birthdays. He never missed a call. He forgave when others would have walked away. He stayed long after he was disrespected, because he believed his consistency proved his worth. And what did it bring him? Nothing. No one chased him. No one fought for him. People treated him like furniture. Useful, familiar, but invisible. Because Leo never introduced scarcity. He was always there. Always available. Always predictable. But then something shifted. Not through rage, not through dramatic goodbyes, not through manipulation. Through absence. Quietly, silently, he stopped showing up. He didn't announce it. He didn't send a speech. He simply stopped being everywhere all the time. And then something strange happened. They came back. The very people who ignored him, who disrespected him, who forgot him, they reached out. Not because they suddenly valued his kindness, but because they missed the version of themselves that had power over him. They feared the loss of what they once took for granted. Machiavelli wrote, "Men are driven by two principal impulses, either by love or by fear." Leo had been loved weakly, lazily. But when scarcity appeared, when absence replaced availability, fear took over. Fear of losing control. Fear of losing access. Fear of losing the easy comfort of his presence. And that fear turned into obsession. This is the formula. You must first establish value. Your intelligence, your integrity, your charm, your presence, these are the foundations. But without scarcity, your value will fade in their perception. The second ingredient, limited access, is what transforms quiet respect into burning obsession. Think of it like fire. Wood is fuel. Without wood, fire dies. But wood by itself is cold, ordinary. Now add a spark, sudden, fleeting, scarce. The spark ignites the wood, and only then do you have fire. Value is the wood. Scarcity is the spark. Together, they create a blaze no one can ignore. So the question becomes, are you giving unlimited access to your value? Are you handing out sparks until they no longer burn? Or are you creating scarcity, limiting access so that your presence, your words, your attention become unforgettable? Obsession doesn't come from being everywhere. It comes from being missed. Now let's be clear, most people misunderstand scarcity. They confuse it with drama, with childish games, with half-hearted tricks. They think ignoring a message for a few hours is scarcity. They think posting a cryptic quote on social media is scarcity. They think silence mixed with subtle hints still keeps them in control. But this isn't scarcity. That's theater. That's noise. That's manipulation. True scarcity is quieter, heavier, sharper. It is not pretending to be unavailable while secretly watching every story, liking every photo, or orbiting from the shadows. It is not sulking, hoping they'll notice your absence. It is not crafting strategies to make them jealous. That is performance. Performance may win curiosity, but it will never win obsession. Because obsession only arises when absence is real. Scarcity, in its purest form, means withdrawal. Not to punish, not to manipulate, but to recalibrate. You step back not to make them suffer, but to remember your worth. You remove your presence not to cause chaos, but to restore balance. Scarcity is not noise, it is silence. Machiavelli once said, "The wise man does at once what the fool does finally." Most people wait until they are broken, until they are disrespected beyond repair, until they are exhausted to finally disappear. But the wise know when to retreat before they are consumed. They don't wait to be devalued. They remove themselves the moment they sense they're being taken for granted. Scarcity means you stop leaking energy. You stop checking their posts. You stop sending the first message. You stop keeping yourself endlessly available for their comfort. Instead, you live. You grow. You build. You become unreachable not because you're hiding, but because you're occupied with becoming. Think of it like this. If someone can always reach you with a tap, you are digital wallpaper. If someone must wonder, must wait, must question, you are a locked door, and locked doors spark curiosity. People want to know what's behind them. They push, they search, they scheme. Scarcity builds mystery, and mystery feeds obsession. But here's the warning, scarcity must be authentic. If you vanish with the secret hope that they will chase you, you've already lost. Because your absence is still tied to them. That's not scarcity, that's dependence in disguise. True scarcity means your focus shifts from them entirely. You are not vanishing for them, you are vanishing for you. You are detaching not to manipulate their emotions, but to reset your own. And here is the paradox. When your absence becomes authentic, when your scarcity is real, that is when obsession ignites. Because for the first time, they cannot read you. They cannot predict you. They cannot summon you at will. You have become an unanswered question, and the human brain hates unanswered questions. So remember this distinction. Fake scarcity is noise. Real scarcity is silence. Fake scarcity is performance. Real scarcity is discipline. Fake scarcity is about them. Real scarcity is about you. And the moment you step into real scarcity, the rules of the game change forever. When you finally withdraw, when you finally stop being endlessly available, the effect on others is immediate, but not always obvious. At first, they feel relief. They assume your silence is temporary. They tell themselves, oh, they're sulking, they'll come back. They test the waters with breadcrumbs. A casual text, a half-hearted, miss you, story, a like on your post. They expect a reaction, because you've always reacted. But then something strange happens. You don't respond. You don't orbit. You don't return to their gravitational pull. And that's when it hits them. They lost control. For the first time, they can't predict you. For the first time, their comfort is gone. For the first time, uncertainty has entered the room. And uncertainty is the spark that ignites obsession. They begin to spiral. Where did you go? Who are you with? Did you move on? Did I push too far? Did I lose them forever? They rewind old conversations, decoding silences that once meant nothing. They search. They panic. Because the human mind does not obsess over what it fully understands. It obsesses over what confuses it, what slips through its fingers, what cannot be neatly explained. Think about the last time someone vanished from your life without explanation. Did you let it go easily? Or did you replay every moment, every word, every detail, trying to make sense of it? That is the power of scarcity. It transforms you from a predictable presence into a lingering mystery. Machiavelli understood this when he said, "It is much safer to be feared than loved, if one of the two must be lacking." In this case, fear is not terror. It is the fear of absence. It is the fear of losing access. It is the fear of no longer holding power over you. When someone realizes they cannot summon you, cannot predict you, cannot read you, they panic. And panic births obsession. But here's the catch. When they come back, they don't come back with full commitment. They come back lightly, testing, probing, checking. They're looking for cracks. They want to know if your silence is real or if it's just a performance. One emotional leak, one fast reply, one post that screams, "I still think about you," and the illusion is shattered. They'll know you're still theirs, that your absence was just an act. And the obsession ends. That's why your silence must be absolute. Scarcity cannot be staged, it must be lived. Because only then does their uncertainty grow into longing. Only then does their longing turn into obsession. And here is the cruel paradox. The more peaceful your silence, the louder their chaos. They expected drama, not indifference. They wanted a fight, not a void. They wanted anger, not serenity. And when you give them nothing, no explanation, no retaliation, no plea, their mind collapses inward. They are left to battle themselves, to wrestle with the loss, to spiral into obsession. Scarcity works not because it punishes others, but because it forces them to confront the truth. They never owned you. They only borrowed you. And now, the rental has expired. When you finally master scarcity, something profound shifts, not just in how others see you, but in how you see yourself. At first, you may feel guilt. You may feel fear. You may feel as if you are abandoning people or being cold. That's because you've been conditioned to believe your value comes from your availability. But once the dust settles, once the silence holds, you begin to see the truth. Your presence was never meant to be a common product on a crowded shelf. It was always meant to be rare. And here is the payoff: respect. Not the shallow respect people give with words, but the deep respect that comes only when they realize they cannot control you. People can only respect what they cannot command. They can only admire what they cannot predict. They can only crave what they cannot guarantee. By withdrawing, you force them to face your absence. And absence carves itself deeper into memory than presence ever could. Machiavelli wrote, "A wise ruler should appear merciful, faithful, humane, upright, and religious, but should be ready to act contrary to those qualities when necessary." You have been merciful. You have been faithful. You have been endlessly available. But now it is necessary to become scarce. Not to harm, not to manipulate, but to survive. Because endless availability is self-destruction, and strategic absence is self-preservation. And what do you gain? space to rebuild your energy, space to rediscover your worth, space to grow without the weight of being someone else's emotional safety net. You gain clarity, seeing who reaches out from respect, and who only lingered because access was free. You gain power, the quiet kind, the kind that does not need to announce itself, because it radiates naturally when others cannot reach you at will. Eventually, you even gain obsession. They begin to chase not because you asked them to, not because you begged, not because you demanded, but because you became scarce. Scarcity creates mythology. The less they see of you, the more they think of you. The more unpredictable you become, the more they wonder. And in that wondering, obsession is born. But here is the final paradox. By the time they begin to obsess, you may no longer care. Because true scarcity changes you too. It rewires your mind away from dependency. It teaches you that your worth was never tied to their validation. It reminds you that silence is more powerful than begging, that indifference cuts deeper than anger, that absence speaks louder than words. So what is the ultimate payoff? Freedom. The freedom of not needing to be everywhere, for everyone all the time. The freedom of no longer being predictable, expendable, forgettable. The freedom of living by Machiavelli's timeless strategy. Appear rarely, and you will be desired intensely. Appear constantly, and you will be ignored effortlessly. Scarcity is not the art of cruelty. It is the art of discipline. It is the refusal to drown your value in abundance. It is the courage to walk away without announcement, without revenge, without noise. It is the strategy of power, not in kingdoms, but in the kingdom of your own life. Because once people realize they can no longer reach you at will, they will do one of two things: vanish or chase. And both outcomes are victories. If they vanish, you are free. If they chase, it is finally on your terms. That is the Machiavellian secret. Scarcity creates obsession, but more importantly, it restores your sovereignty. It returns you to yourself. And in a world that constantly demands your attention, that is the rarest and most powerful victory of all.